So I want to talk a little bit about cool organizations like Spine IQ and Care Response. So Spine IQ is a non-for-profit organization that is literally trying to collect large volume data on PROMs, patient-reported outcome measures, across multiple organizations that relates to spinal care. And it's not just any kind of spinal care. I mean, they are promoting non-pharmacological conservative management of spinal-related disorders. And most importantly, they collect patient satisfaction data. When I talk about Spine IQ, or why I encourage it, is that it's gathering evidence from multiple different professions about what patients get the best outcomes from. So it's a really great way of engaging in evidence-based, guideline-congruent, patient-centered care when it comes to spine-related disorders. It also, the Spine IQ helps educate you as a clinician what's best to do for different spine-related disorders. That's why I talk about it in other classes as well, like how or why it's important for gathering data for reports or findings. But in today's class, most importantly, I wanted to mention it because it collects this patient satisfaction data. And if you are a registered chiropractor, you get access to this evidence-based training material, but you also get to use the data to benchmark yourself. So you can see, how are you doing compared to all these other people out there? And do you need to raise your game, or do your associates need to raise their game? Are they achieving, and are you achieving good outcomes in your patients that you expect? Because not all chiropractic patients that come in and see you for spinal-related disorders are going to get better. But how do you stack up against the average? Really, really important benchmarking, but also great collection of this patient-reported outcome measures that can be used then for decision makers later on. And trust in chiropractic. It is really beneficial for people. It's a good thing. So I'd highly recommend it. Just give you an example of how patient-reported outcome measures can be useful for the professional and policy and decision-making level. I want you to check out this study done in Sweden and published in 2018. So these guys collected data using pen and pencil questionnaires. I mean, imagine if you use this electronically. So they measured the numeric rating pain scale, so the NRS, the Oswestry Disability Index for back pain, the health-related quality of life, this EQ5D index, a visual analog scale for self-rated health, that was that EQ visual analog scale, that big thermometer, the one-off thermometer. And they measured this in 23 chiropractic clinics throughout Sweden. And they managed to get data from 246 back pain patients that answered the baseline questionnaire, and 138, so 56% of them, completed the follow-up after 4 weeks. And these are the conclusions from this article, literally copied and pasted for you, so I haven't changed any of this. I just put the asterisks in, so just so you know, the red asterisk, that was not theirs. So patients with acute back pain reported statistically significant and clinically important improvements in back pain intensity, back disability, and health-related quality of life, and statistically significant improvements in self-rated health over 4 weeks of chiropractic care. I don't know about you, but isn't this an amazing thing to know? It forms part of that database that shows us that when it comes to back pain, chiropractic care is as good as anything else out there. And why is that important? Because other care options, like drugs and surgery, come with a whole host of side effects that are very nasty, that cause a lot of suffering and cost an awful lot for the government. So being as good as everything else out there, without all these side effects and costs that go along with it, chiropractic care ends up being one of the best options out there. We don't know this without collecting this kind of data. And we don't just have to ask pain. I mean, these guys ask the pain and health-related quality of life, and these things statistically significantly improve, and most of them clinically important improvements. Remember we talked a bit about that minimally clinically important difference? That's this MCID, and that's why I just wanted to highlight that MCID. These were not just statistically significant improvements. My point in this is a tiny little significant change, but these were clinically important improvements. Shows that chiropractic care really matters to people's outcomes. And that's what that minimally clinically important difference stands for, the MCID. So they go on to conclude that patients with chronic back pain reported statistically significant, albeit smaller and non-minimally clinically and significantly important changes in all patient-reported outcomes except self-rated health. Right? So it's less than clinically significantly important. The observed improvements in these patient-reported outcomes may be of interest to clinicians and decision makers involved in managing back pain patients. This is where this data can add to decision makers. If we don't provide them with this data, then decision makers don't have data to make decisions about. So then they probably won't make decisions that in any way, shape or form enable patients access to chiropractors. So if we don't collect this data, is kind of like my point of this slide, no one else is going to collect it for us. So important. And remember, this was pen and paper collected over only 4 weeks of chiropractic care from 23 clinics in Sweden. I'm hoping you can see the benefit if this was done in thousands of clinics from many different countries all around the world. And there's obviously problems with pen and paper. Imagine if this was collected routinely, electronically, and went into a big database. Well, that's the kind of thing that Spine IQ can do for us. And there are other organizations. For example, there's this Care Response. And this Care Response is for practitioners in the UK, the EU, or in Europe, and in the USA. And this is a free platform that it's not too hard to implement. And then all of this data that you collect on your patients, they've got a reservoir or a certain set of patient-reported outcome measures to choose from that they have available for you. And then all of this gets collected into this bigger database so that scientists can write up those kinds of publications that I just shared with you, like that Sweden study, and show the benefit of chiropractic care. Now, this Care Response is free. It's a pragmatic system to help practitioners gather and report clinical outcomes and patient satisfaction information with minimal work from you or your practice staff. So it's a cloud-based service. There's no software that needs to be installed, and patients can choose to complete questionnaires online. And it can also be on iPads in your office. And patients, they like to use it. It seems to work quite well. And assessments can also be sent via email. So for anyone with an email address, the outcome measures requests get sent out automatically. Because in the UK, which is where this one was developed, this Care Response, PROMs are considered a priority on a national level. So for example, some healthcare services in the UK, like certain forms of surgery, it's mandatory that all their patients have to fill in. So if you go for hip surgery, knee surgery, groin hernia repair, or varicose vein surgery, it's mandatory that all patients have to fill in these patient-reported outcomes specifically for those surgeries. And it seems to be pushing that way, that if you are in the UK, chances are patient-reported outcome measures is going to become a mandatory part of all healthcare, which I think is fantastic. And the more data we have on this, the better off we are. And that's why I really like this idea of Care Response. And I'd highly recommend, if you're practicing in the UK, in Europe, or in the US, that you join Care Response. The more people that are using Care Response, the more data we've got. They've made it totally free. And I mean, this has cost them millions. I take my hat off to Jonathan Field and his colleagues that have put this all together. It's an excellent effort and service for the profession. There's Care Response, it's cloud-based service, there's no software to install, and you can get this bigger PROMS data collected for us, which is of tremendous value for the profession. So I also want to share with you, there's many publications on Care Response that have been published so far, and I want to share one of them with you just to give you an idea of the kind of data that we can get out of a system like Care Response. So here's a prospective cohort study that monitored patients' outcomes in 8,222 chiropractic patients. I mean, now you're getting real cool data, right? I mean, this is exciting stuff. So they looked at the Bournemouth questionnaire score, and they did the Start Back tool. They used the Start Back tool to identify high, medium, and low risk of chronic disability. And you remember that Start Back tool, it was those 9 questions to detect musculoskeletal pain symptoms, function, fear avoidance behavior, catastrophizing, anxiety and depression, and then would put you into one of 3 groups to see, who's most likely to end up with disabling problems. There was 2 ways that patients came into the system, into the Care Response system. So 41% were the National Health Service referrals. So they were NHS patient referrals, and these are partially government funded. And 59% of these 8,222 people were self-referred, and they pay themselves per visit, just so that you get the idea. And this study found that those NHS patients were more chronic, in more distress, and displayed more comorbidities than private patients. So that's interesting to note. And they also found that patients with low back pain and neck pain that presented privately were more likely to report improvements, potentially because they weren't in that high distress state. But over 2 weeks, the privately presenting patients were more likely to have better outcomes over 90 days, which was interesting. So in terms of the clinical changes they found in the study, about 80% of private patients and 60 to 70% of the NHS patients achieved a minimally important change of 30% by 90-day follow-up. That's a big deal. So 80% of private patients, or 60 to 70% of those worse NHS patients, achieved a minimally important improvement of 30% by 90-day follow-up. And again, this is just one of many, many studies that's been done using patient-reported outcome measures. This one in particular was using care response. And why are we not doing more? Well, the chiropractic profession is notoriously bad at funding research, number one, but we're also notoriously bad at participating in research. We could do so much more, seriously. And each and every one of us could do more. We could all participate. If you're in the UK, US, or the EU, you could participate with Care Response. It's free. We could start collecting this data now. We could all put some more funding into research. And we could all add to these PROMs, and we could then publish more papers on it. So do keep this in mind. If you don't ask the questions, you won't get the answers. So if we don't collect the data, if we don't collect these different patient-reported outcome measures, we're not going to get any answers. I just highly recommend it. And I think it's so interesting and cool, and I want to finish off just by mentioning this one survey, because we don't just have to ask about pain. There's many different patient-reported outcome measures about quality of life or mental health or just general well-being, satisfaction rates. And the reason why I encourage that is, if you look at this survey was a national health survey in the US of almost 35,000 people. Now, 24% of them had at least seen a chiropractor once in their life, and 8.4% had seen a chiropractor in the last year. And then they ask those patients that had seen chiropractors, what benefits did they report getting under chiropractic care? And look at these numbers and look at what's improving. So 64% helped them improve overall health and made them feel better. 42% reported sleeping better. We hardly have any research on sleep. Imagine doing sleep PROMs, sleep patient-reported outcome measures, or even, proper EEG sleep studies. Anyway, 40% reported reduced stress and helped them to relax. Wouldn't surprise me if that's related to the prefrontal cortex effect that we have. Almost 40% reported easier for them to cope with a health problem. Same thing, this whole stress thing. 33% reported a sense of control over their health. Almost 30% reported feeling better emotionally. We aren't measuring mental health. We're not measuring sleep and stress and coping ability or wellness. 13% reported improving their relationships with others. These are the things that we could look at. And I just get so excited at the thought of it. So the more of us that can do this, the more of us that will do it in a way that we can collect this electronically and larger scale, the better. So just finally, just to summarize for you, there's lots of different patient-reported outcome measures. I hope you're a bit more excited about these now. I've given you some examples on pain patient-reported outcome measures like the visual analog scale, the numeric rating scale. We've looked at some disability PROMs like the Roll and Morris Disability Questionnaire, the Oswestry Disability Index, and the Neck Disability Index. We've looked at more comprehensive low back and neck pain questionnaires like the Bournemouth Questionnaire, which covers a lot of those different aspects, as well as stress levels. We've got some of these psychosocial aspects of pain, like the Keel Start Back tool, the Fear Avoidance Belief Questionnaire. We talked a bit about how to find the right patient-reported outcome measure for your patients, and we talked about some specific ones like the MyMOP2 or the Visit-Specific Satisfaction PROM or the Self-Perceived Measure of Health PROM. We specifically looked at examples about quality of life PROMs, the SF36 and the PROMIS system, and we looked at some mental health PROMs like the DAS, the HADS, the Beck's Anxiety Inventory and the Generalized Anxiety Disorder Questionnaire. And then we finished off by talking about the value of patient-reported outcome measures, that they're patient-focused, that they can help us identify best quality care from a patient perspective, that we can identify safety issues, that it pushes us towards more of a value-based care, and that we can use them for benchmarking. And then we specifically chatted about spine IQ and care response. So I hope you've enjoyed this class. I know I certainly have. Cheers. I hope you've enjoyed this class. Please do keep going. There are many more classes available for you, and more courses are being developed and uploaded on an ongoing basis. And for those of you who are members of our online resource library at www.kairoshub.com, formerly www.therealitycheck.com, I also hope these classes will help you to get the most out of the resources available to you, so that together we can enlighten the world about the science of chiropractic and enable more people to get access to chiropractic care so that we one day can see a world of people expressing their optimal potential. I want to thank you for being part of this vision. We literally provide an entire library full of resources that you will need to effectively communicate the science of chiropractic to your current and to potential practice members. These resources are also a great way for your CAs or your techs to learn from and to help them answer questions from the public about the benefits of chiropractic care. They really can save you an awful lot of training time. If you're not yet part of this large group of chiropractors who choose to practice in a patient-centered, evidence-informed way, who enlighten their practice members about the science of chiropractic as well as share their own clinical experience, please do join us at chiroshub.com and get access to well over 80 public whiteboard animations grouped into relevant topics that you can use as waiting room videos in your office. You can embed them in your website and you can email them out, the links to these, to your entire patient list, one at a time. They are the best way to communicate the science of chiropractic in a public-friendly manner. Along with these whiteboard animations, there's a wealth of reference social media content. We have resized images for you so you can use them as screensavers or on Facebook or Instagram, as well as high-resolution A4 size or A3 size posters, so if you wanted to print them out. And these social media digital assets, like many of our whiteboard animations, are also available in up to 8 different languages, with many more on the way. We also have downloadable written research summaries on all these different topics. Of course, they're fully referenced. Please do note, though, that these written summaries are only available for members to download and print. Many practices use these, they laminate them, which is a great idea. And finally, my new book is soon coming out, if it's not already published. So if you wish to read it, please visit www.secretsofthespine.com. Thank you. Stay safe and don't forget to help enlighten the world about the science of chiropractic.